Welcome to my show. A guest here. Her name is Brianna Valentine. Mrs. Brianna, how are you doing, ma?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Mrs. Brianna. Firstly, you are an author. You are also a mental health advocate. Can you please, Mrs. Brianna, discuss more about yourself and how you are doing currently now, Mrs. Brianna?
So, yes, my name is Brianna Valentine. I'm a mental health advocate who does not speak through the lens of being recovered. And what that means is that a lot of the times when we hear conversations about suicide, we are hearing from the perspectives of the therapists and psychiatrists who are treating these patients. We're hearing from the perspectives of the grieving loved ones who have lost someone to suicide, or we're hearing from the perspective of the recovered survivors who, a lot of the times, are sorrowful about their struggles with suicide. And me not speaking through the lens of being recovered, I offer a little insight into what it looks like to still be struggling very heavily with suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, I also definitely agree with you, Mrs. Brianna. It's definitely not easy. During even most of the time, with this time of technology and digital world we are into, there are a lot of increase in anxiety and depression. And suicide is one of the most important thing that we definitely need to talk about. So it's a very, very important thing. And also, probably, suicide prevention might be something we often get wrong in some ways. Some people might see it as something that is not even in my own culture. Yeah, sometimes they say it's not really even a choice on its own. So, in your view, what do you feel like are the biggest misconception the public holds when it comes to suicide prevention, Mrs. Brianna?
I feel there are a few I could go into detail about, but I'll keep it short. I would say one of the biggest misconceptions that the public holds is this idea that people who are suicidal don't actually want to die. Um, while it is absolutely true that there are some people who have struggled with suicidal thoughts who later say that they never actually wanted to die, it's very important that you let someone who is suicidal say that to you, as opposed to going into a conversation with someone who is expressing to you that they're struggling with suicidal thoughts, thinking that they don't want to die. Because that is only a comfort to the person who is learning to navigate. That's only comforting to the person who now gets to separate themselves from the issue and feel like, oh, they don't actually want to die. They're just feeling a little bit sad, and I can comfort them because they're sad, you know? I also think that the idea that people who are suicidal are just seeking attention, I think that there is an ounce of truth to that. That I think, however, that they're seeking the help that comes with someone paying attention to what's going on with them, you know? And I don't think it's something that is performative in most cases.
And I also definitely agree with you, Mrs. Brianna. We do know that suicide is a very big thing. And also, when someone has this kind of thought, most of the time they usually say that it's not something that they really want to do. They are not really they're not really ready to die or leave this world in the life they've come, but probably due to some certain reason. And as you said earlier, which I'm really a little bit shocked that some people are also using it as a form of attention and a form of areas to get more attention towards the circumstances, towards the area they find themselves. And also that is why we need something like friend, talking to a friend or talking to your loved ones. So I would like to dive to that point because most one of the most important tool that one know that to prevent suicide is such area, talking to a loved one and other areas like that. So what do you think in your own experience are some of the best practices for talking with a friend, student, or loved one you are concerned about without causing more distress in the area, Mrs. Brianna?
I would say, in order to go about having these conversations without causing more distress, you have to lead with curiosity and compassion instead of fear. You can say things like, have you felt this way for a while? This doesn't change how much I love you. How can I help? What do you need right now? Just things like that can really help someone feel like you've got their back until they're ready to take the next step in their healing process. I think it's also important to avoid cliches. Saying things like it gets better or like you'll be all right, that can feel extremely dismissive. And it's important to just be real in these conversations. It's important that these conversations are not handled with kid gloves, but it's also important that these conversations are not handled with reckless abandon. I would say, lastly, validating their feelings is a very important step in helping someone to not feel more distressed. And I think a lot of people believe that when you validate someone who's struggling with suicidal thoughts, feelings, it gives them permission to die. But that is not at all the case. A lot of people feel that like saying things like, oh, I can understand why that's weighing on you makes the person who's feeling suicidal feel like, oh, okay, well, if you understand my pain, then that's okay to just die now. And that's not how that works. That's not what's going to happen. It's going to help them feel like you've got their back.
I want to honestly, sincerely thank you for that insight, Mrs. Brianna, because that shows that the way one would discuss with someone who has this type of thought is very important. So having this type of communication is plays a very powerful role. So when someone has such person who has such kind of experience, when someone wants to show that kind of love and empathy towards such person, someone has to know the kind of words and also the kind of areas one can dive into when it comes to communicating with such person so that the person will not be in a position he or she will be more motivated to get into a point to even definitely commit that suicide. So there have to be definitely steps someone have to do to give that communication, to give that area. And that is why I would like to dive to, there could definitely be frameworks. You probably think one can recommend areas like schools, workplace, and other areas that we think that it can definitely help people who have this kind of situation, Mrs. Brianna. So, do you think there are some tools or there are some frameworks you recommend for schools, workplace, or families to create a safer or environment for this type of discussions, Mrs. Brianna?
Yes, absolutely. I think that there are many schools that are offering therapy now, and that is a wonderful thing. There are many workplaces that are having monthly check-ins, mental health check-ins with their employers, and that is very important and wonderful that they are doing that. But I think beyond those things, it's really important how a suicide attempt or a completed suicide, is handled. I think that's what sets the stage for people feeling safe to reach out for help. It's important that the workplace, the school doesn't shun somebody who's attempted suicide, doesn't forcefully kick them out or make them lose their job or their schooling because they needed help, because they needed a visit to the mental hospital, because they needed medication, because they needed therapy, etc. I think beyond like using books like mine to talk about more helpful ways as opposed to harmful ways to have these conversations, I think that these the manners in which people navigate the aftermath of someone attempting suicide is crucial to how people around them feel and how they feel safe to reach out.
Thank you so much for the insights, Mrs. Brianna. That shows that even these areas like schools, they have to show this kind of love, and that is definitely what we need in our time now. I definitely used to try my best to say this because the time that we are now, people really do not really care about one another like before. Everything is now more of self-centered, and that thing cause a lot of issues in this type of situation. When someone has situation like this, probably in a school or in a workplace, every single person should show that kind of support, that kind of empathy and love. And that is what could help that person to know that he or she is probably, most of the time, most of this type of people who have this type of situation probably usually feel like they are only the person who are facing such situation, and probably that might not even really be the case. A lot of people, we have more than billions of people in this world. Even some people are just on the street walking. So a lot of people are facing the same situation that he or she is facing, and that is why we need this kind of empathy and love, most especially in schools, workplace, to show that kind of love and empathy, not to just see them as not part of one or throw them out. It's not something that should be encouraged. I would like to dive to the point of culture, Mrs. Brianna, because we have different culture. You're in another place. I am in Africa. It's very, very big culture, and the way culture understand area when it comes to suicide prevention is very, very different. So, how do you think cultural attitude or stigmas around mental health influence the way we talk or do not talk about suicide? Mrs. Brianna?
I think that there are some cultures and communities that view mental illness as weakness or shameful or some kind of personal failure or spiritual failure, even. And I think that is, I feel that view on mental illness is dangerous because it causes, or rather, it can cause both sides to stay silent in times when someone needs to speak up. It can cause someone learning to navigate to stay out of it because they want to stay pure of or pure from the illness. And it can cause someone who's struggling to be silent because they're fearful of rejection or fearful of being misunderstood.
Definitely agree with you, Mrs. Brianna. Honestly speaking, culture really play a good role in this area. You know, as you said earlier, when culture background like that, people some people see it as if probably a failure or something like a spiritual issue when it comes to that point. Because how can you be thinking to take your life? You know, it's something that the different culture see it in a very different way. And even in my place here, probably we even see it in a very different way. When we hear something called suicide, it's definitely a different reasoning that we have, a different type of ways we need to see the person, a different type of sometimes, you know, it's very funny sometimes. They'll just say, let's take him for deliverance. We need to pray on him and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
definitely, suicide is something that is very, very, you know, it's really something that is really happening in our time. And it's not really the case in those type of perspective. We have to just know how to have this conversation and know how to make that person feel among. That is very important so that the person will feel like he or she is really, really impacted with the community he or she find himself. One of the reasons why we need community in our time. I also like to dive to the point of examples in your own ways, if you have any, Mrs. Brianna. I do not know if you have, but with the conversation you have, if you've had any, um, can you please share an experience, your an example where you know changing how someone approaches suicide conversation really made a life-saving difference, Mrs. Brianna? If you have any, Mrs. Brianna.
Yeah, so I have a personal example. I'm very open about my struggles with suicidal thoughts, and I made a suicide attempt that landed me in the mental hospital. Um, and that was very shortly before I published this book. I ended up in the mental hospital actually the day before this book was published. And um, I was nervous because my school had contacted my parents, even though I asked them not to. And so now I'm waiting, to have these conversations with my parents. But I get on the phone with my mom and she's calm. She met me with calm and compassion because she had read my book. And she said that if she hadn't read my book, she probably would not have known how to handle the situation. And she might have freaked out. And that might have caused more distress for everyone. But she was able to meet me with that calm and compassion because she read my book and because she was able to take the lessons from my book and use them in real time now.
Honestly speaking, Mrs. Brianna, that is also very, very powerful. Right from the beginning, when we had the conversation, I do know that there's definitely a reason why you brought a book into this world, and there's definitely a reason why you are even interested in having opportunities like this to discuss these situations. Because you know you might have probably have situations like that which really happened, which I'm so shocked, but it is just a way to give back, and that is just the beauty of the life that we are into. You know, giving back now is a way to make people feel like they are not really alone, to make people learn from the experience you've had when it comes to suicide thought. It is definitely not easy. We do know that this life that we are is definitely tough and uneasy when it comes to some circumstances. But definitely, when suicide thoughts come, we could definitely find better people we could definitely speak to. And I am very, very glad you have a very, very caring mother who is loving, who is caring, who really sees your heart and who shows you the kind of love and the care you need. That is very, very powerful because who knows if probably the mother was not there? Who knows what could have happened? And that is why you and I had the opportunity to be speaking today because you are still alive and you are giving back and giving this information in the way that is meant to be done. I'm so happy to have that opportunity. And lastly, Mrs. Brianna, I would like to ask, there might be hope, but what do you think really continues to give you the hope in fight for better suicide prevention, Mrs. Brianna?
What gives me hope is the people around me now. My family, my friends, my therapist, they're all so caring and willing and wanting to understand. So I know that there are other people in the world who are caring and willing and wanting to understand the people who are struggling in their lives. I've had many conversations about suicide with many people of many different walks of life, and being able to give them a little bit of insight into the mind of someone who is struggling with suicidal thoughts and have them walk away knowing that they now have some better tools to talk to people is what gives me hope for better conversation surrounding suicide, and gives me hope for better ways to encourage people to live in the future.
Honestly speaking, that is also very, very powerful, Mrs. Brianna. Honestly speaking, that is the hope. And that is what I've said earlier. Community, having this kind of empathy, care really helps in a very long way. And I'm definitely hope that I also have to show you that I really love you, I really care for you, and I'm also going to be there no matter the circumstances. Having this type of thought is definitely a very tough one. Even during my historic time, I didn't even go to that point, but I do know that life is very, very tough in some circumstances that it's really heavy. And when it gets heavy, that cold will just start to come. Probably maybe she just let it just be over with it and stuff like that. But if you want to have some kind of care, one kind of caring, and having parents or family, friends that really shows that support and care, definitely it really helps the healing to continue to groom to the point whereby one is strong again to conquer the world that we are into. This world is really tough, and we have to just show the kind of full strength that we definitely need. As we are speaking right now, a lot of people, hundreds, are having thoughts of suicide, and maybe hundreds are also even committing suicide currently. And that is how this world we are into is, and we have to continue to fight what you are doing currently now, which is very beautiful. I also want to sincerely thank you for the insight, Mrs. Brianna. Lastly, Mrs. Brianna, there's a question I normally ask during the end of the show. From our forefathers, from our ancestors, there are a lot of beautiful things that do exist during our ancestral time that is missing in our time today. If there is anyone or anything you would like to bring back to our time today, Mrs. Brianna, what do you think that thing would be, Mrs. Brianna?
I would bring back, like, people are allowed, right? Like, kinds of people are allowed. Yeah, I would bring back some fighters, like some people who were really making change.
I definitely agree with you, Mrs. Brianna. During our time, during that historic time, there are a lot of people who really wants to make change, like who really sincerely want to make change. But during the time that we are now, the generation that we are is being dominated by money, and everybody just have to be in that trend and that trend. But during that time, we have the sense of community. Everybody wants to show that kind of empathy and want to really improve one another in areas that he or she lacks. That is why during the historic time, when we see the people who are leading currently, they have this sense of jointness. We look at just imagine the biggest company that we have today. It's not one person who had that idea, it was a joint work. And that is the power of community during that time. And that is the issue I probably most of the time I used to think about how is it going to be in the next 20 years, because during this time now it is really, really different, and we definitely hope for the best. I also want to use this opportunity to thank you for the time and the opportunity on speaking on this suicide prevention. I'm very happy that you're still alive and you're still well. And I definitely want to every single love that I have, that it's just life, and life is just the way it is. We just have to continue to conquer the ups and downs that we find in life. Because whether we like it or not, we come in this life and we are also living one day, whether we like it or not. So I also want to use this opportunity to thank you, and also spreading this message in the way you know that you can do it. Thank you so much, Mrs. Brianna.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Mrs. Brianna, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.
Thank you, you too. Bye.